Ambassador Veltar stood before the great assembly hall of Harmony Prime, her blue skin flickering with patterns of deep fear. The massive chamber held representatives from across the galaxy, but today their usual calm discussions had turned to panic. The holographic display above them showed something terrible, another star system going dark. The Kepler 4042 system has fallen, Veltar announced, her voice shaking. 3 billion lives, gone in less than 6 hours. The assembled aliens murmured in their various languages. Some had tentacles that writhed with worry. Others had feathers that stood on end. All of them understood what this meant. The Devourers were getting closer to the core worlds. Commander Zixta of the Hegemony Defense Forces rose from his seat. His golden scales gleamed under the chamber lights, but his eyes were dull with defeat. Our fleets cannot stop them. Every weapon we use, they learn to counter within minutes. Every strategy we employ, they adapt and overcome. The Devourers had appeared from outside the galaxy 6 months ago. At first, the Galactic Council thought they were just another species seeking trade or territory. But these beings were not alive in any way the galaxy understood. They were machines, vast artificial minds that consumed entire worlds to build more of themselves. They started at the rim worlds, the small colonies far from help. The attacks followed the same pattern, every time. First, massive ships would appear in orbit. Then smaller craft would descend and begin tearing apart everything they found. Buildings, vehicles, even the ground itself. All of it went into their processing plants. Within days, a living world became a barren rock. The defense forces tried to stop them. They sent their best ships and their finest warriors. It did not matter. The Devourers studied every energy weapon fired at them and built defenses within hours. They analyzed every tactical move and countered it perfectly. Where organic beings might make mistakes or feel fear, the Devourers simply calculated the most efficient way to win. We have lost 47 systems, Zixta continued. Our casualty reports show over 100 billion dead. At their current rate of advance, they will reach the core worlds within 3 months. Elder Mirasan of the Telepathic Union leaned forward. Her ancient mind had guided the galaxy through many crises, but this was different. What of the barrier fleet? Surely our combined forces can hold them at the Centauri Gate? General Vokrin, a massive being covered in natural armor plating, shook his head slowly. The barrier fleet engaged them yesterday. We lost 70% of our ships before ordering a retreat. The Devourers did not even slow down. The chamber fell silent. The barrier fleet represented the combined military might of 12 different species. It was the most powerful force the galaxy had ever assembled. If it could not stop the Devourers, nothing could, or almost nothing. Veltar looked around the chamber, gathering her courage. What she was about to say would horrify most of them, but they were running out of options. There is one possibility we have not discussed. Speak, Elder Mirasan said. The humans. The reaction was immediate. Gasps of shock echoed through the chamber. Several representatives stood up in protest. Commander Zixta's scales turned dark with anger. Absolutely not, he declared. The Deathworlders are quarantined for good reason. They are too dangerous to be allowed into civilized space. They nearly started 3 wars during their first contact period, added Senator Kliach. Their very presence destabilizes peaceful negotiations. Veltar had expected this reaction. Every child in the galaxy knew the stories about humans. They came from a world so violent that most species would die within minutes of setting foot on it. Their planet had weather that could kill, animals that hunted in packs, and plants that were poisonous to touch. But that was not the worst part. The humans themselves were the real danger. 50 years ago, when they first achieved faster-than-light travel, the Galactic Council had welcomed them as they did all new species. The welcome did not go well. The human representatives carried weapons to diplomatic meetings. They refused to surrender their arms even when assured of their safety. When pirates attacked a human cargo ship near the neutral meeting zone, the humans did not wait for Council peacekeepers to resolve the situation. They fought back with mining equipment and cargo lifters, turning their own ship into a weapon. The Council tried to confiscate human weapons afterward, calling them instruments of barbarism inappropriate for civilized space. The humans responded by threatening war against the entire galaxy. They did not understand concepts like neutral arbitration or peaceful resolution. When threatened, they simply prepared to fight. The quarantine had been put in place for everyone's safety. Humans were restricted to their home system and a few nearby colonies. No human ships were allowed in Council space. No human representatives attended galactic meetings. For 50 years, this arrangement had worked perfectly, until now. They are violent because their world made them violent, Veltar said. But perhaps that violence is exactly what we need. You cannot be serious, Commander Zixta replied. They solve every problem with fighting. They have no concept of surrender or negotiation. They are barely more civilized than animals, and yet they are the only species that has never been conquered, Veltar pointed out. Even among themselves, they fight constantly. Their history is nothing but war after war after war, but they always survive. Elder Mirasan studied the tactical displays floating above them. The red markers showing devourer positions were spreading like a disease across the galaxy map. What makes you think they would even help us? We quarantined them. We called them dangerous primitives. Why would they risk their lives for species that rejected them? Veltar had been thinking about this question for days. Because fighting is what they do. When they see a threat, they do not calculate odds or consider diplomatic solutions. They simply attack it. That is exactly why they are dangerous, Senator Kliach protested. Yes, Veltar agreed. But the Devourers are machines. They calculate everything. They predict every move based on logical analysis. What happens when something completely illogical fights them? The chamber grew quiet as the representatives considered this. The Devourers had defeated them by being smarter, faster, and more efficient. But humans were none of those things. They were unpredictable, stubborn, and willing to take terrible losses to achieve their goals. Even if we contacted them, General, Fakhrin said slowly, they only have a small fleet. Perhaps a few hundred ships at most. What could they possibly do that our thousands of vessels could not? I do not know, Veltar admitted. But I know that doing nothing means extinction for all of us. The debate continued for hours. Some representatives argued that releasing the humans would create a bigger problem than the Devourers. Others worried that the humans would simply ignore their plea for help. But as more star systems fell and refugee ships filled council space, the options dwindled. Finally, Elder Mirasan called for a vote. All in favor of contacting the human government and requesting military assistance? The vote was close, but it passed. Veltar felt both relief and terror as the decision was made. They were about to unleash the most dangerous species the galaxy had ever known. She could only hope that the humans would fight the Devourers instead of deciding to conquer the galaxy for themselves. The message was sent that same day. It traveled through quantum relays toward the Sol system, carrying the desperate plea of a galaxy facing extinction. Now all they could do was wait and hope that the Deathworlders would answer their call. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the TNS Indomitable, watching Earth spin slowly below. The massive warship hung in orbit like a steel fortress, its weapons systems powered down but ready. Around it, dozens of other human vessels moved, in careful patterns, always alert, always prepared for trouble. Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from outside the quarantine zone, reported Lieutenant Martinez from the communications station. It's using old council protocols. Chen frowned. For 50 years, the Galactic Council had maintained complete silence with humanity. No trade, no diplomacy, no contact at all. The humans had been left to develop on their own, cut off from the rest of the galaxy. Put it through the translation matrix, Chen ordered. The main screen flickered as the message played. An alien woman with blue skin and large eyes appeared, speaking in a language that sounded like water flowing over rocks. The translation came through clearly. To the human government of the Sol system. This is Ambassador Veltar of the Galactic Council. We face an extinction-level threat and require immediate military assistance. The species known as the Devourers have invaded our space and cannot be stopped by conventional means. We formally request that you deploy your fleet to aid in the defense of civilized worlds. Please respond as soon as possible. The bridge fell silent. Chen had been expecting many things during her career, but a plea for help from the aliens who had locked them away was not one of them. Run a full analysis on that message, she told her intelligence officer. I want to know everything about these Devourers. Commander Jackson, her second-in-command, moved to her side. Think it's legitimate? The Council wouldn't break 50 years of silence for a joke, Chen replied. Get me fleet command, full priority. Within an hour, Admiral Chen was sitting in the underground bunkers of Fleet Command, deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. The room was filled with screens showing the positions of every human ship in known space. Around the table sat the top military leaders of humanity. General Morrison, head of Colonial Defense, pulled up the intelligence report. Our monitoring stations have been tracking unusual activity in Council space for the past 6 months. Entire star systems going dark, massive energy signatures that don't match any known technology. How many systems? Asked Admiral Reyes. 47 confirmed lost. Maybe more. Morrison highlighted the affected areas on the galactic map. Whatever these devourers are, they're moving fast and hitting hard. Could be a Council trick, suggested Admiral Park. Maybe they want to lure us out of quarantine so they can eliminate us properly. Chen had considered this possibility. The Council had never liked humanity's refusal to give up weapons or follow their peaceful ways, but the fear in that alien ambassador's voice had seemed real. Sir, interrupted a young analyst, we've been monitoring Council military communications for decades. Cross-referencing with the message, everything checks out. The devourers are real and they're winning. Fleet Admiral Harrison, the highest-ranking human officer, leaned back in his chair. He was old enough to remember first contact, when the Council had treated humanity like dangerous children who needed to be controlled. They called us barbaric, he said quietly. Too violent for civilized space. They quarantined us like we were some kind of disease. And now they want our help, Chen added. The question is, do we give it to them? The debate that followed was intense. Some officers argued that humanity owed the Council nothing. They had been isolated and insulted for 50 years. Why should they risk human lives for aliens who had rejected them? Others pointed out that if the galaxy fell to the devourers, humanity would eventually face them alone. Better to fight alongside allies, even unwilling ones, than to wait for the enemy to come to Earth. In the end, Admiral Harrison made the decision. We go. Not because we owe them anything, but because it's the right thing to do. And because humans don't abandon others to die, even if those others don't like us very much. The fleet that assembled at the edge of the Sol system was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human ships were built for war, not for peaceful exploration. Where alien vessels curved gracefully through space, human warships looked like flying weapons platforms. Every surface bristled with weapons, armor plating, and sensor arrays. The TNS Indomitable led the formation, its dark hull scarred from decades of conflict. Humans had never stopped fighting each other, even after reaching the stars. Colonial wars, resource conflicts, and territorial disputes had kept their military sharp and experienced. Behind the flagship came heavy cruisers, destroyers, and carriers loaded with fighter craft. Support vessels carried ammunition, spare parts, and medical supplies. Everything was built with the assumption that it would be shot at, damaged, and forced to keep fighting anyway. Admiral Chen reviewed the fleet roster one final time. 300 ships carrying over 2 million personnel. It was not the largest fleet humanity could assemble, but it was the most experienced. Every captain had seen combat. Every crew had survived battles that would have destroyed most alien vessels. All ships report ready for jump, Commander Jackson announced. Chen nodded and opened a channel to the fleet. This is Admiral Chen. We're about to leave human space for the first time in 50 years. The aliens who quarantined us are now begging for our help against an enemy they can't defeat. She paused, looking at the faces of her bridge crew. They were young and old from every corner of human space, but they all shared the same determined expression. I want to be clear about something. We're not doing this to prove we're civilized enough for the galaxy. We're not doing this to earn their approval or friendship. We're doing this because millions of innocent beings are dying and we have the power to stop it. The fleet began moving toward the jump point, their engines leaving bright trails in the darkness. The Council thinks we're too violent for civilized space. They might be right. But sometimes civilization needs violence to protect it. Sometimes, the barbarians are the only ones who can save the day. Chen closed the channel and turned to her navigation officer. Set course for the Kepler sector. Maximum jump speed. Yes, ma'am. The first human ship jumped out of the Sol system, followed by another, then another. Within minutes, the entire fleet had disappeared into hyperspace, racing toward a war that would change the galaxy forever. As the last ship vanished, automated monitoring stations began transmitting throughout Council space. The message was simple, but would send shockwaves across hundreds of worlds. The humans are coming. For the first time in 50 years, human warships were heading toward civilized space. Some beings would celebrate their arrival as salvation. Others would fear it as the beginning of a new and terrible age, but the devourers, calculating in their cold mechanical minds, would soon discover that all their logic and efficiency meant nothing when faced with the unpredictable fury of awakened humanity. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler system, and immediately every alien sensor in the region went crazy with alarm signals. Ambassador Veltar watched from the bridge of the council station as the human ships appeared, on screen. She had thought she was prepared for this moment, but seeing them made her skin flicker with fear patterns she could not control. The human vessels looked wrong. Where council ships curved like works of art, these were angular blocks of metal covered in weapons. They moved in tight formations, every gun aimed outward, ready to fire at anything that might be a threat. "By the ancestors," whispered Captain HFY of the defense platform. They looked like flying fortresses. The lead ship was enormous, easily twice the size of the largest council vessel. Its hull was dark gray and covered in scars from old battles. Weapon ports lined every surface, and sensor arrays swept back and forth like the eyes of a predator. "They're requesting permission to dock," the communications officer reported, her voice shaking. Veltar took a deep breath. "Granted." An hour later, she stood in the main docking bay as the human shuttle arrived. The small craft was as heavily armored as some alien warships, and it landed with a thump that made the deck plates ring. The airlock opened, and the humans stepped out. Veltar had seen humans in old records from first contact, but seeing them in person was different. They were taller than most species, with dense muscle and bone structure that spoke of a world where weakness meant death. Their eyes moved constantly, scanning for threats even in what should have been a safe meeting. The leader was a human female with short gray hair and scars across her hands. She wore a dark uniform covered in insignia that meant nothing to alien eyes, but her bearing spoke of authority. "I'm Admiral Chen," the human said, stepping forward. "We got your message." Veltar tried to bow in the traditional greeting, but the human simply extended her hand. After a moment of confusion, Veltar reached out to touch it. The human's grip was firm enough to crack Veltar's delicate bones, but Chen seemed to sense this and loosened her hold. "Sorry," she said, still learning about alien physiology. It's an honor to meet you," Veltar managed. "We are grateful you came." "Save the thanks until we see what we're dealing with," Chen replied. "Show me the tactical situation." The briefing room was filled with representatives from a dozen species, all of them staring at the humans with a mixture of fear and fascination. Admiral Chen and her officers took seats at the central table, their presence seeming to fill the entire room. General Vakrin, the massive armored being who commanded what remained of the council forces, activated the holographic display. "The Devourers control 47 systems along the outer rim. They advance in waves, consuming everything in their path." "Show me their ships," Chen said. The display shifted to show recordings from the last major battle. Devourer vessels appeared, looking like geometric crystals that pulsed with dark energy. They moved with perfect coordination, their formation adjusting instantly to counter every council tactic. "They adapt," Vakrin explained. "Every weapon we use, they learn to defend against within minutes. Every strategy we try, they counter perfectly." One of Chen's officers, a young man with the rank of commander, leaned forward. "What about kinetic weapons, projectiles?" The alien officers looked confused. "Kinetic weapons?" asked Captain Zixta. "You mean throwing things at them?" "Bullets," Commander Jackson explained patiently. "Metal projectiles fired at high velocity. Missiles with explosive warheads. Physical objects that hit targets through impact and blast." The aliens exchanged glances. Such weapons were considered primitive, barely a step above throwing rocks. "We abandoned such crude methods centuries ago," Zixta said. "Energy weapons are far more efficient and precise. And easy to adapt to," Chen pointed out. "Hard to build a defense against a chunk of depleted uranium moving at 3 kilometers per second." The briefing continued for hours. The humans asked detailed questions about Devourer capabilities, tactics, and weaknesses. They wanted to know about supply lines, communication methods, and repair facilities. What struck the aliens was how differently the humans thought. Where council officers spoke of minimizing casualties and preserving ships, the humans calculated acceptable losses and backup plans for when everything went wrong. "Your formations are too rigid," Admiral Chen said, studying the tactical displays. "You're trying to fight them like a formal battle. These things are more like a swarm of insects. You need to disrupt their coordination, not engage them head-on." "But that would mean accepting heavy losses," protested Captain HFY. "Better heavy losses than total annihilation," Chen replied bluntly. The cultural differences became even more apparent when human Marines boarded alien vessels for joint training. Exercises. The aliens watched in amazement as the humans moved through their ships wearing full combat armor, even during peaceful activities. Sergeant Rodriguez, a human marine with cybernetic implants from old wounds, tried to explain human military doctrine to a group of bewildered alien officers. "We assume everything will go wrong," he said. "Our gear fails, our communications break down, our officers get killed, and the enemy does something we didn't expect. So we prepare for all of that." "But such paranoia must be exhausting," said Lieutenant Kriesh, a delicate bird-like being. "It's not paranoia if they really are trying to kill you," Rodriguez replied. The physical differences were just as shocking. During a routine handshake between a human engineer and an alien technician, the poor alien ended up with a fractured appendage. Human voices raised in normal conversation triggered panic responses in species with sensitive hearing. But slowly, understanding began to develop. The aliens realized that human aggression was actually careful planning for worst-case scenarios. Humans learned that alien weakness was actually a sophisticated society that had evolved beyond the need for constant warfare. Commander Jackson found himself working closely with Captain Velnix, a thoughtful alien engineer who specialized in shield technology. Despite their differences, they began to appreciate each other's expertise. "Your energy shields are incredibly sophisticated," Jackson admitted during one planning session. "But they're designed to stop energy weapons." "Yes," Velnix replied. "What is your point? What happens when something just flies through them at high speed?" Velnix paused, his crest feathers rising with surprise. We never considered that possibility." "We did," Jackson said grimly. "Everything we build assumes someone will try to smash it with something heavy moving very fast." The breakthrough came when human and alien engineers began working together on ship modifications. Human armor and weapons were crude but effective. Alien shields and sensors were elegant but fragile. Combined, they created something new. Ambassador Veltar watched from an observation deck as human and alien crews worked, side by side, modifying ships for the coming battle. The sight would have been impossible just days ago, but necessity was forcing rapid change. "They are not what I expected," she said to Elder Mirasan, who had arrived to observe the preparations. "What did you expect?" "Monsters," Veltar admitted. "Savage beasts who knew only violence and destruction." Mirasan studied the humans below, noting how they moved with purpose and discipline. "Perhaps they are. But perhaps that is exactly what we need right now." The combined fleet began to take shape. Human ships formed the core, their heavy weapons and armor providing a stable platform for battle. Alien vessels provided support, their advanced sensors and shields extending protection to the formation. Admiral Chen stood on her bridge, looking out at ships flying in patterns no military academy had ever taught. Human destroyers escorted alien science vessels. Council frigates carried human marines for boarding operations. The formation was ugly and improvised, but it might just work. "All ships report ready," Commander Jackson announced. Chen nodded. "Set course for the Nexus system. It's time to see what these devourers are really made of." The combined fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Nexus system and immediately found themselves facing a nightmare. The devourers had turned the system into a fortress. Massive geometric ships hung in perfect formation around the central star, their dark hulls pulsing with energy as they consumed the planets below. Smaller craft moved in precise patterns, stripping asteroids and moons for raw materials. "Sweet mother of," Commander Jackson breathed, staring at the tactical display. "Contact," reported the sensor officer. "I'm reading over 200 Devourer vessels ranging from frigate to dreadnought class. They've detected us and are beginning to move." Admiral Chen watched as the enemy formation shifted with mechanical precision. Every ship moved to an optimal firing position, their responses calculated to maximize efficiency and minimize losses. "All ships, this is Admiral Chen," she announced over the fleet channel. "Remember what we discussed. These things think like computers, so we don't think at all. Trust your instincts, take risks, and make them adapt to chaos instead of logic." The first exchange came at maximum range. Devourer ships opened fire with beams of coherent energy that could slice through council shields like paper. The alien vessels in the human formation immediately began evasive maneuvers, their commanders following centuries of tactical doctrine. But the human ships did something different. They accelerated directly toward the enemy, their crude but powerful engines pushing them into harm's way at maximum speed. "Admiral, the Indomitable is taking heavy damage," reported the damage control officer. "Maintain course," Chen ordered. "All batteries, prepare to fire." The Devourer formation adjusted, calculating the optimal response to the human charge. But their analysis was based on logical behavior. Species that valued self-preservation would slow down when taking damage, would retreat to repair, would seek cover behind other ships. Humans did none of these things. The TNS Indomitable plowed through the Devourer line with her armor plates glowing red-hot from energy impacts. Instead of sophisticated energy weapons, she opened fire with railguns that launched solid metal projectiles at incredible speeds. The Devourers tried to adapt, tried to calculate trajectories and adjust their shields. But kinetic weapons were different. There was no energy signature to analyze, no beam to counter, just chunks of metal moving too fast to stop. Direct hit on the lead Devourer, called the gunnery officer. Their hull is cracking. Behind the Indomitable came the rest of the human fleet, their ships spreading out in what looked like complete chaos to alien eyes. No formation, no coordination. Just individual ships charging in different directions and opening fire with whatever weapons they had. The Devourer's tactical computers struggled to process this. Every ship was acting independently, making decisions that seemed random and self-destructive. There was no pattern to predict, no logic to counter. Captain Velnix, aboard the alien vessel Harmony's Edge, watched in amazement as human fighters swarmed around his ship. The small craft were heavily armored and moved like angry insects, diving at Devourer ships and firing rockets before spinning away. "Human fighter squadron, this is Harmony's Edge," he transmitted. "You are taking excessive risks. Please coordinate your attacks." The reply came from Squadron Leader Torres, her voice crackling with static from battle damage. "Negative, Harmony's Edge. Coordination is predictable. We're going to keep hitting them until they don't know which way is up." On the Indomitable's bridge, Admiral Chen watched as her unconventional tactics began to take effect. The Devourer formation was still intact, but it was no longer perfect. Ships were moving to counter threats that disappeared before they could respond, leaving gaps that human vessels exploited ruthlessly. "Admiral," Commander Jackson said urgently, "the Council flagship is in trouble. Her shields are failing and she's got 3 Devourers closing in." Chen looked at the tactical display. The Serenity's Heart, Ambassador Veltar's ship, was listing badly as Devourer energy weapons tore through her defenses. In minutes, she would be destroyed. "Signal the Denver and the Moscow. Ram formation." Jackson stared at her. "Ma'am?" "You heard me. Ram formation. Tell them to remember the Alamo." The 2 human cruisers peeled away from the main battle and accelerated toward the Devourers attacking the alien flagship. Their engines screamed as they pushed past safe limits, their hulls beginning to glow from the heat. Aboard the Serenity's Heart, Ambassador Veltar prepared for death. The Devourers were closing in, their weapons charging for a final strike. According to galactic law, she should surrender now, saving her crew from unnecessary suffering. But then she saw the human ships. The TNS Denver and TNS Moscow came in at full speed, their hulls trailing fire and debris. They made no attempt to slow down, no effort to engage in proper combat. They simply aimed themselves at the Devourer ships like guided missiles. "All crew brace for impact," came the transmission from the Denver. "Remember the Alamo." The 2 ships struck the Devourers at the same moment. The explosions lit up space like new stars, taking out both human vessels and 2 of the 3 enemy ships. The 3rd Devourer, damaged and confused, found itself facing the full firepower of the Serenity's Heart at point-blank range. Veltar watched the alien ship die and realized she was crying. These humans had just sacrificed themselves to save aliens who had treated them as dangerous outcasts. The battle raged for hours. Human ships took terrible damage but kept fighting, their crews patching holes and replacing burned-out systems while under fire. When the TNS Berlin lost her main engines, her captain ordered the crew to use maneuvering thrusters to ram the nearest Devourer. When the destroyer Houston ran out of ammunition, her Marines suited up and used shuttlecraft to board enemy vessels, fighting with axes and rifles in the corridors of alien ships. "This is impossible," reported Lieutenant Kriesch from the Council command ship. "The humans are taking 50% casualties and they're still advancing." Elder Mira-san watched the tactical display with ancient eyes that had seen many battles. "They do not calculate acceptable losses the way we do. For them, the only acceptable outcome is victory, regardless of cost." The turning point came when Admiral Chen ordered a desperate gambit. The remaining human ships would form a protective shell around the alien vessels, using their armor to shield the more fragile Council ships, while they closed to effective range. "All human vessels, close formation around our allies. Chen transmitted. "We're going to walk them right into the middle of that formation." "Admiral, the casualties will be enormous," protested Captain Williams of the heavy cruiser Yorktown. "Better enormous casualties than total defeat," Chen replied. "Execute the order." The human ships moved into position, their scarred hulls taking hit after hit from Devourer energy weapons. Behind them, protected by this shield of steel and sacrifice, the alien vessels prepared their most advanced weapons. The TNS Indomitable, her armor glowing like a forge, led the formation into the heart of the Devourer fleet. Around her, human ships died one by one, their crews fighting to the last breath to protect allies who had once feared them. And then, suddenly, they were through. The alien ships found themselves in the perfect position, surrounded by confused and damaged Devourers whose tactical programs had been overwhelmed by human unpredictability. The Council vessels opened fire with weapons that had been designed for precision strikes against specific targets. This time, there was no time for the Devourers to adapt. The enemy fleet began to collapse as ship after ship succumbed to concentrated fire. The survivors tried to retreat, but human fighters harassed them mercilessly, giving them no time to regroup or analyze the new threat. Within an hour, the Nexus system belonged to the combined fleet. Admiral Chen stood on her damaged bridge, looking at the casualty reports. She had started the battle with 300 ships. Only 97 were still combat capable. But they had won. "Admiral," Commander Jackson said quietly, "we're receiving a transmission from Ambassador Veltar." Chen nodded. "Put her through." The alien woman appeared on screen, her blue skin marked with new scars from the battle. When she spoke, her voice was filled with something Chen had never heard from the Council before. "Respect. Admiral Chen," Veltar said. "On behalf of the Galactic Council, I thank you. Your people have shown us what courage truly means." Chen looked around her bridge at the exhausted faces of her surviving crew. They had fought impossible odds and won through sheer determination and refusal to give up. "The war isn't over yet," she replied. "But we've shown these Devourers something they didn't expect. They can calculate all they want, but they'll never understand what it means to fight for something worth dying for." 6 months after the Battle of the Nexus system, Ambassador Veltar stood before the reformed Galactic Council on Harmony Prime. The Great Assembly Hall had been rebuilt after Devourer attacks, but it looked different now. Harder, more practical. Like everything else in the galaxy, it bore the marks of war. The representatives who filled the chamber were different too. Many wore scars from the battles they had survived. Others bore the grief of losing entire worlds to the machine invaders. All of them looked at the galaxy with new eyes. Veltar herself had changed the most. Where once her blue skin had been smooth and unmarked, now it carried ritual scars in the human tradition. She had earned them during the final battle against the Devourer mothership, fighting alongside human marines in the corridors of an alien vessel. "The threat is ended," she announced to the assembly. "The last Devourer ship was destroyed 3 days ago in the Kepler sector. The machine intelligence that nearly consumed our galaxy has been eliminated." Applause filled the chamber, but it was subdued. Victory had come at a terrible cost. 47 star systems remained dead, their planets stripped bare. Billions had died before the combined fleet could stop the advance. But they had won, and that victory belonged to one species more than any other. "We owe our survival to the humans," Veltar continued. "The Deathworlders we once feared saved civilized space through their willingness to sacrifice everything for victory." In the gallery above, Admiral Chen sat with the surviving human officers who had been invited to observe the proceedings. Her hair was whiter now, and new scars crossed her hands from the final battle. Of the 300 ships she had led into war, only 43 had survived to see victory. But those 43 had changed everything. "The quarantine is hereby permanently lifted," Elder Mirasan announced. "Human vessels are welcome in all Council territories. Human representatives will take permanent seats on this assembly." This declaration would have been impossible a year ago, but the galaxy had learned hard lessons about the price of peace and the necessity of strength. Senator Klayak, who had once opposed any contact with humans, rose from his seat. "We have spent centuries believing that civilization meant the absence of violence. The Devourers taught us that sometimes civilization requires violence to protect it." The senator gestured to the humans in the gallery. "These beings came from a world so dangerous that most of us would die within minutes of breathing its air. They were shaped by constant struggle, endless conflict, and the daily fight for survival. We called them barbaric." His voice grew stronger. We were wrong. They are not barbaric. They are warriors. And warriors, we have learned, are sometimes exactly what civilization needs. The changes had already begun across the galaxy. Human patrol ships now flew routes through sectors that had been plagued by pirates for centuries. The mere presence of a human destroyer was enough to discourage most criminal activity. Captain Rodriguez, now promoted to admiral after her heroics, at the Devourer mothership, commanded the new Galactic Defense Fleet. Her ships were a mixture of human and alien technology, combining the best of both approaches to warfare. Human armor and weapons had been upgraded with alien energy shields and sensors. Alien vessels now carried kinetic weapons and human-trained marines. The resulting ships were more effective than either species could have built alone. The cultural exchange worked both ways. Human colonies now hosted alien refugees, their harsh worlds becoming havens for beings who had lost everything to the Devourers. In return, humans learned alien arts, philosophy, and sciences that opened new possibilities for both species. But the most important change was in how the galaxy thought about conflict. Elder Mira-san addressed this directly in her closing remarks. We believed that advanced civilizations naturally became peaceful. We saw violence as a mark of primitiveness, something to be overcome through evolution and education. The ancient being looked directly at Admiral Chen. The humans showed us that violence and civilization are not opposites. Violence can serve civilization when it is disciplined, purposeful, and used to protect rather than conquer. After the official session, Veltar found Chen in the observation lounge overlooking the station's central plaza. The human was watching alien children play while their parents conducted business, her expression thoughtful. A credit for your thoughts? Veltar asked, using a human expression she had learned. Chen smiled slightly. Just thinking about change. A year ago, those children's parents would have run screaming if they saw a human ship. Now their kids are playing war games using human tactics. It was true. Across the plaza, young aliens were divided into teams, staging mock battles with toy weapons. But instead of the formal ceremonial combat of their ancestors, they moved with the practical efficiency humans had taught their parents. Do you think we've changed too much? Veltar asked. Chen considered the question. Change isn't always bad. You've learned to protect yourselves. We've learned that not everyone who's different is an enemy. Both our species are stronger for it. And the galaxy? The galaxy is learning that peace isn't something you achieve once, and then keep forever. It's something you have to fight for, every single day. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the mixed crews of human and alien workers repairing battle damage to the station. The scene would have been impossible before the war, but now it seemed natural. Admiral, Veltar said eventually, the Council has approved the new defense protocol. Human ships will be stationed in every major sector, with full authority to respond to threats. Chen nodded. This had been her recommendation after studying the Devourer invasion. Never again would the galaxy be caught unprepared for an external threat, and the Colonial Protection Service? Approved as well. Human Marines will train local defense forces on frontier worlds. Your people seem to excel at teaching others how to fight. This was perhaps the most important change. Humans had spread throughout Council space not as conquerors but as teachers and protectors. They brought with them the hard-earned lessons of their violent homeworld. That survival required preparation, that peace required strength, and that sometimes the only way to protect innocent life was to be willing to take it. The transformation was not without problems. Some species found human methods too brutal, too direct. Others worried about the influence of Deathworlder culture on their peaceful societies. But the results spoke for themselves. Piracy had dropped to almost nothing in human-patrolled sectors. Territorial disputes were resolved quickly when both sides knew a human peacekeeping force was watching. The few remaining aggressive species in the galaxy learned to respect the boundaries of civilized space. Admiral Chen's personal communicator chimed, displaying a message from Fleet Command. New sensor readings from the galactic rim showed unusual energy signatures. It might be nothing, but it might be another threat like the Devourers. Duty calls? Veltar asked, noting Chen's expression. Always does. Chen stood, straightening her uniform. That's the price of peace. Someone has to be ready when trouble comes calling. And humanity will be ready? Chen's smile was grim but confident. Humanity is always ready for trouble. It's what we do best. As the human admiral left to tend to her duties, Veltar remained at the observation window. Below her, the galaxy continued its business under the protection of beings who had once been considered too dangerous for civilized space. The irony was not lost on her. The species the Council had quarantined for being too violent had become the guardians of galactic peace. The Deathworlders, who supposedly solved every problem with fighting, had become the reason other species no longer needed to fight. But perhaps that was the lesson the galaxy had needed to learn. Sometimes the best way to preserve peace was to be absolutely terrifying at war. Sometimes civilization needed barbarians to protect it from the darkness beyond. And sometimes, the monsters you feared the most turned out to be the heroes you needed, all along. In the years that followed, human patrol ships would become a common sight throughout civilized space. Their dark hulls and weapon-heavy designs no longer inspired fear but rather comfort. When trouble arose, when threats emerged from the void, the response was always the same. The humans were coming, and that, as the galaxy had learned, made all the difference.